So Jeff, again, thank you so much for being on our podcast, Live Bold and Boss Up. We're so excited to have you here. I think we literally have been talking about this for like 3 years, by the way, or at least maybe not to you, but like to me and to Tim and to Steph. I was like, oh, we have to have Jeff on. We have to have Jeff on.
Yeah, no, I feel terrible about it. Tim was reaching out to me a few times, and I certainly dropped the ball a few times. So I'm very appreciative for you guys to still welcome me back.
Of course. No, we've talked about like where we want to go for this season for our podcast. I think it worked out perfectly because your just history and where you're going and everything is just like right on par with all the things that we're talking about in 2023. So I think it's perfect timing.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So I know, Jeff, just to kind of give our listeners your background, which they probably already know, but you were first round draft pick to Cleveland, and then you ended up at the Bucs, which is how you know Tim, right? And how long were you at the Bucs for?
I was with the Bucs for 4 years.
Okay.
So I was drafted by the Browns out of Notre Dame, and then was actually traded down on draft day 3 years later to New Orleans Saints. So I had a pit stop there with, it was the first year that Drew Brees and Sean Payton got there and pulled into town. And so it was a real great experience coming through Katrina after Katrina and what the city was going through and saw the rehabilitation of the city. It's kind of a little bit of a renaissance. And then signed my free agent deal in Tampa and kind of came home. I'm from Central Florida, so it was nice to come home.
That's great. And so being a professional football player, that takes so much hard work and dedication. Is that what you always wanted to do growing up? Is that just kind of like what you were set on?
No, couldn't be farther from it. My dad was a naval officer. My mom was a school teacher, and talking about being a professional athlete or even conceiving that was almost like cussing in our house growing up. That just was not the plan. And it was always academics first, get your academics first, do what you need to do to make sure that you are going to have the right background and plan and foundation to be able to excel regardless of what happens. And frankly, I didn't start playing football until high school. So
really?
It wasn't something like that. It was just built in me along the entire path that I was going to be a professional athlete. Even when I got to after going to Notre Dame and playing football there, we still just didn't really kind of buy into our own hype or buy into our own story of it, and it almost a little bit was naive the entire process. So even on draft day when I got drafted in the first round, I wasn't ready. From the standpoint they were like, okay, we're sending the plane to come get you, and we're going to do a press conference. Make sure you wear a suit. And I didn't have a suit. I was at home. I just came home for the weekend with my parents. I was just hanging out. Didn't have a suit. So on draft day, I'm like wearing a suit, like one of my dad's suits. Didn't fit. So disheveled and everything. I mean, it was just not prepared. We were very naive to that, and so it was always, again, just focusing on academics. So no. Professional athletic career was never in the cards.
That's interesting. I love hearing the backstory, right? Because all you see, or all most of us see, is what they show you on TV, and everyone always looks ready and presentable. And it's fun to think like, okay, you're wearing your dad's suit now. I want to like go back and watch clips now.
No, that's great.
And
fun. I think so back up. And then you went to the Bucs. You were there for 4 years. And then what did you do after you retired or after you were done playing football?
So actually I had one more stop. So I thought I was done, and it was 8 days before the season started. I got a call from the Bengals, and their starting center went down in the third preseason game, and so they needed somebody to come in with some experience. Their backup center was an undrafted rookie, coincidentally out of Notre Dame, and they just, at the time, Andy Dalton was their starting quarterback, their franchise quarterback. They just couldn't bring themselves to say, hey, we're going to put our franchise quarterback at risk behind an unproven center. And we opened up Monday night against Baltimore, against the Ravens. And so it was a really good test early, and they were really concerned about that. So because of that, they brought me in, worked me out. And literally, I got the call, said, "Hey, are you still in shape? Are you good to go?" And I had already started like the transition of going into retirement mode. Like I was a bigger guy, losing weight, and just kind of getting into like a normal person's body kind of thing, whatever that is. And I said, "Yeah, I'm in good shape, but I've lost some weight." And they said, "Well, how much weight have you lost?" And I said, "I'm down. I was like down like 30 pounds." And he said, "Okay, well, can you play it that weight?" And I said, "Well, I think so. We can figure it out."
Oh
So
my
I came
gosh.
in, and so I like to joke around and say I got a cup of coffee on the way out. It was just almost like it was giving me an opportunity to make sure it's all out of my system. And so once I finished that season, that made 10 years for me, and I got a couple of calls. The Giants wanted me to come in. It's just I told my agent I was done. And it was ready, and from there, that's when I moved on. And so yeah, so I had one more pit stop at Cincinnati. Enjoyed it. It was quick. I was only there for 4 months, but it was a good experience.
And weren't you at some point the highest paid center in NFL?
Yeah, the Bucks and Coach Gruden, made that happen. It was a cool deal. Obviously, that's ultimately a lot of the way you're kind of judged at this level is through your contract and obviously through your draft. And so I joked with my business partner. I was like, I was the best in the world at twice at something, and he's like, "What?" And I was like, playing center in the NFL. I was the number one, and the highest paid at one point, and so. The stars kind of aligned for that. Coach Gruden kind of fell in love with me because of the stuff that I did to his defensive line while I was in New Orleans, and so it was just a really really good fit in that, especially in that first year there.
That's awesome. So it kind of sounds like you always had this like business mindset, regardless of football, from your upbringing. So were you kind of balancing some businesses on the side while you were playing football?
Yeah. So it wasn't because of my upbringing. So because my dad will say like this is all he'll tell people this is all him. Like I don't like didn't have a business bone in his body, neither did my mom. And frankly, I didn't even when I went to Notre Dame, I didn't even I didn't go to business school, and so I kind of learned on the streets a little bit. And I when my early on in my career in Cleveland when I got drafted by the Browns. So this is probably my second year. I was a young guy going out, enjoying kind of the nightlife and doing what I ever did. And the cool thing about being a pro football player, especially in a town like Cleveland, um, when the bars close or the club closes, they'll always say, "Hey, you can hang out with a couple of your friends on the side, or just like while we're cleaning up here, have a couple more drinks, whatever it is." And so I did that, at times, and I kept doing it, and I just kept hanging out. I made golly great relationships, but I did it this one spot, and I got introduced to this guy before, but I did this one spot where the manager there just did things a little bit differently. Where like typically the manager would join us and sit with us while like everybody else was cleaning up, and like he was running around with a little notepad, some notes that he had made throughout the night, kind of correcting his staff, doing things, and just was like, "Hey, you can hang out, but I gotta work, but maybe I'll catch up with you in a little bit." That was just a different experience. And so I said, that's the guy. Like I want to get with that guy and see what he's doing, and let's figure out something that we can do together. And that's where it sparked for me. And his name was Bobby George, was my first business partner in Cleveland, and still one of my best business partners ever. We're still partners today in some things. And we opened up our first place off of that night basically. And actually, I approached him with it probably a couple weeks later, and he said no. He was like the hot girl, the hot girl while you're making me chase him. And it wasn't even that. It was more along the lines was that he was so concerned about losing my money. And so because I was going to be the investor and he was ultimately going to be the guy that was executing the plan,
Right.
that was his biggest concern. And I got so lucky early, because that's not the case with most professional athletes that invest in business early or get involved in business, and especially in the bar and restaurant business. Typically, it's not a great story, it's not a great end. But for for that, it was absolutely, I invested in the person very, very early, and I learned that lesson very early, and it was something that I continued to do, throughout my career. But yeah, so I got involved in business early, and so I opened up my first restaurant my third year. And from there we really kind of rolled, and that was my partner's thing. He's like, I don't want you to invest again. He's like, we're going to reinvest everything that we do here, and we're going to keep going. And we bought buildings and restaurants and other opportunities and everything, just kind of rolled that in. But the funny thing is, guys, is that so I was the Bucks. This is where it kind of really started like getting serious. Where like I had like two jobs. I was a professional football player and I was a business person. Well, like the Bucks equipment staff like almost had me like a side desk in the equipment room.
Did
And
they
like
really?
I go in there like in between like meetings and practice and everything. I literally go in there, take calls, get on the computer.
Wow.
It's like my own little office in a way. And things like Jim Sorensen was the equipment manager at the time, great guy, and just kind of allowed me to kind of be in there. And they would actually be quiet, like they would be quiet for me while I was on a call. Like it was the coolest thing, it's a cool experience. But yeah, I was busy with business very, very early on.
Wow, that is really cool.
Yeah.
So then you knew after you were done that you wanted to just go full time into business, like as an entrepreneur, starting businesses. Is that kind of what your plan was?
Yes. Part of it also too, a transition from anything that you kind of dedicate your life to for so long can be pretty difficult. I mean, you guys both were in cheer, and that was a big part of your lives, right? It was something you enjoyed tremendously, and not to do that anymore. I'm sure, sometimes you guys miss it at times. For us, as you transition from football, that can be a very, it's, 18 years, for me, high school, college, and pro. It's something that is a big part of your life, and it can certainly be difficult. And for me, it made it a little bit easier because I had something to be able to transition to. It wasn't like, okay, now I got to figure out, what's next. Like, no, I was already working on the plan, and it kind of came back to how my parents, again, were raising me from the very beginning. Football was never the first plan, and to an extent, that never went away. Like, I didn't, directly think that through when I was in the moment. Like, hey, like I'm working on like what is the primary plan,
Right.
and allowing, football to kind of still continue to be the secondary plan. But that's what it was, and being able to transition out and move on to the business space full time after football was done, it made that transition much easier than if I didn't have a plan.
For sure.
You were doing, so you did the like restaurant bar thing. Didn't you do like food items or something like that?
Yeah, I've kind of touched a few things. And so we've had a brand of nuts that went into 7-Eleven and went across,
That is really random.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. I got, it was just, you kind of just come across things, right? And so it was this brand of nuts called Papa D's nuts. And like, there's some still guys that still come across there every so often. And we got out of it, but it was fun. I got into oil, got into real estate, and my primary business now though is insurance. And I still am in the restaurants, still in real estate, still involved in a lot of stuff, more as an investor, not an operator. Never been an operator in the space. Just really identified really great opportunities and continue to identify really great operating partners to be able to execute the vision at a very high level.
Was it difficult, like transitioning into all these different industries, like football to like business and bars and food?
I'm not gonna try and make it sound like it was easy, but again, it kind of came back to the core part of investing in people. And so for me, there were certainly some misses. I'm not, that we've had some misses that didn't work out well. We've lost 2 restaurants during COVID. I mean, there's just some things that ultimately you have challenges in business, just like you have in life. But this is the thing that I always tell, like, when I'm talking to my kids, or I can't. It's hard to relate to folks in my office with this perspective. But being on an offensive line and having a nose guard sitting right across from you is going to be much more challenging than anything else that I'll ever come across in business. Business is tough and it's challenging, but it's not, you're not out there, someone's not out there physically trying to beat you, like trying to beat you up, And so for me, I always felt like, ultimately, hey, just take a breath and ultimately look for what is your best angle, and keep continuing to identify really strong relationships, keep investing in really great people. And you gotta, once you've invested in those people, make sure that ultimately you're taking great care of those people to be able to make sure that you continue to have the success. And so that's been the biggest thing. And business is business. It's you got to have more coming in than you have going out, and that is the basis of it. And so as long as you keep those core principles and keep identifying really great people, you should be able to recreate really great opportunities in whatever sector you look at.
I love that. It sounds like doing that football stint, right, of having someone like actually trying to not kill you, but like beat you up, right? And you had to think like right away, split second decisions, right, on what you did. So it kind of sounds like business is not easier, but like, right, it gives you a second to like, okay, let me think about this. Let me not be reactionary, but let me ponder it. Let me be strategic about what my move is instead of just kind of going for it right away, right?
Yeah. I think that is certainly with athletics and specifically playing football at a very high level, and then being on the offensive line. That's a big part of my persona and the way that I approach life in general. And so you have that aspect of it, that it's happening quick, that you're only really having to react to a little bit of what the other guys are doing on the other side. The nice thing in the business side of things is that you can be a little bit more intentional and a little bit more planning your approach. But the thing in business is that you still have to act with speed. Like once you make that decision, you have to go. Because it's a competitive place out there. It's a competitive marketplace, regardless of what business you're in. And so it does give you a little bit of an advantage to having to be in those pressure cooker kind of situations, and having those folks sitting right on top of you. But to an extent, you still have to move with speed once you have that decision made.
That's great wisdom and advice. And I know we talked about it before. There's so many crossovers of sports and business. A lot of our clients, they want people that were in sports, competitive sports, to be the employees that they hire, because there's so many attributes and so many like ways of thinking that are similar in the two. And you have that drive and the competitiveness and the hard work and the team aspect of it. So I feel like there's so much crossover between the two.
Yeah, absolutely. I love working with athletes. I mean, I think that a lot of them get like what it really takes to be, especially if you're competing at a high level. Like the guys that were not lazy, like those are the guys that you want to be able to identify and bring along the team. I mentioned being an offensive lineman. I think that's a big part of it. I love working with offensive linemen, former offensive linemen. The reason why, I mean, we're all working for someone else. Up front, you're blocking for a quarterback, you're making a hole for a running back. The only time they call our name is for a penalty. I mean, it's for something bad, and so you're not in it for the limelight. And so you're working with, in conjunction with everybody up front with you. And so I love that part of it. I love that aspect of the game, and I like to try and bring that to the business world as much as I can.
Yeah, I love that.
Mm-hmm. Tell us about your foundation. I was telling Steph and talking about it actually the other day, and I haven't been to one of your galas in a long time, but it's always a great time. Tell us about it. Why did you start your foundation?
Yeah. So first of all, we'll have to get you guys back. After this, we're gonna get it on your calendars. But the reason why I started it was it actually started off as one reason, and it really evolved as I learned a little bit more about it. And so owning businesses in downtown Orlando has a very large homeless population, and you have episodic homelessness, and they're not getting out of it, right? And so for us, I'd always walked around, and I was always the guy that, like, I was giving them like $5, $20, $10, $1 here, $1 there, whatever it was, just to, I felt like, hey, they need this like a million times more than I need it right now. And I just want to do something just to hopefully make their life today a little bit easier. But it just wasn't enough. And so I always felt like, hey, if there was a way to be able to identify the right one that ultimately just made one bad decision and it snowballed and just got out of control, and they just couldn't catch their breath to be able to hit the reset button to kind of get back on the right path, and we could identify them and get them into a position where they could take that breath and ultimately, like, just kind of reassess the situation, help them find another path and get them on the right path, that would be something that would be so worthwhile. And if we could accomplish that, but the problem is, as I started socializing this with kind of my core advisors, was like, ultimately is, how do you identify that one that really wants to help, and they just don't want to get high for the day, and they don't want, they just don't want the easy way out for the day, and then they're going to be there the next day. And so in talking it through a little bit, I got exposed to some relationships over at the Children's Home Society of Florida. They were a group, an organization that serves kids that up till 18. So they serve single mothers, adoptions. They help facilitate adoptions. They're dealing with foster care and assisting and facilitating that. And then, but at 18, they lose their funding. And so ultimately someone needs to come in and really jump in at 18. And so I looked at it as an opportunity to say, okay, well, this is somewhat doing what I want to accomplish, because I can go, and these kids are going to be aging out of foster care. And the quick stats of it is, in Central Florida, the Tri-County area, Orange, Seminole, and Volusia County, roughly about 400 kids age out of foster care each year. Of those 400, 2 out of 3 are homeless within the first 2 weeks, and 1 out of 3 are first 2 years, and one out of 3 are incarcerated in the first 2 years. And the second number is driven by the first number. They just start doing what they have to do to get by. Wow. And so for me, I looked at it as, I'm going to be proactive before they get on the streets, and let's keep them off the streets. And I'm still accomplishing what I initially wanted to do. So that was the initial reason. I had no idea about kids aging out of foster care before I started this process, and I had to get educated on it. Back then, at that time when we came around it, we still were not public with the fact that I was adopted at birth. We just didn't think it was anybody's business, and we just kind of kept it, to ourselves. So I was adopted at birth. My biological mother, she was very, very young when she had me, and I was a mixed race baby. And her father at the time said, "You're just not keeping this kid, so it's either abortion or adoption." And so her third option would have been to run away. And if she kept me, or if she ran away with me, I likely would have ended up in foster care. I likely would have ended up in the same position that these kids were. Or if I was adopted by not great parents, I could have easily got into a really bad rut. And so, like, as I learned about these kids, I was like, man, I was so close to being in their situation. I was so close to having to deal with a lot of the things that they're dealing with on a daily basis. And so, like, we stumbled upon something that connected with me so much more than what anybody, really thought of at the time. And then we came out public, several years later, about my adoption, and it just started all connecting the dots for everybody publicly. So that's ultimately how it started, and really what we do. And we've extended it beyond kids just aging out of foster care. We also help kids that are just in the community that frankly just haven't been identified to be put in foster care yet, because the cops haven't been called enough to the house. And they're in really, really terrible situations, and typically have are opening up our doors for them too.
That's so, like, powerful and meaningful too. It's amazing how that just kind of came all full circle. Yeah. Right? Like, how you're trying to figure out what kind of foundation to create, right? Because as a football player, I think you guys are, it's like one of the things that we do, right? We either, like, donate a lot of our time to a charity or create a charity. And so that's really beautiful that you were able to just kind of come full circle with that.
Yeah, no, the universe kind of works in mysterious ways sometimes.
Yeah,
it does.
It definitely worked out.
No, that's amazing. I love that. And you mentioned to me too, so you have something exciting happening this spring, a book that you wrote coming out.
Yeah. So we're really excited about it. It's been a long time coming. Frankly, I've been working on it for about 7 years. I got urged by a professor years ago to put some effort in putting it together, and then finally I just, I started working with a group to be able to identify some really great opportunities and just put the nose to the grindstone and really push it out this past year. And so super excited about it. Book's title is going to be called Playing for Others. And it kind of really gets back to what I was talking about, being an offensive lineman and kind of everything all that connectivity, even from football to business to the nonprofit space and the charitable work that we do. And so we're super excited about that. It's something been working on for a long time. Brittany, my wife is like, will you please? I'm tired of hearing about it. Please to just get this done.
Please just finish it. What else do you have left? 7 years in the making. What do you got to do for this book to come out now?
Well, I can't wait to read it. Ash and I have an unofficial book club that we have a list of books that we read and want to read. So this is going on our list of what we want to read this year. So I can't wait.
Oh, and back in the day, you mentioned to Tim a certain book that he should read. Do you, and I don't even know if you recommended it to everybody, but back in the day, the book that you recommended to people, especially Tim, he remembers this, is Do You.
Oh yeah. No, it was just one that ultimately, especially at that part of my life, it was something that spoke to me tremendously. And I always thought that when people were, just going through making decisions and really working on, their path in life, and at the time, I think Tim may have just gone to Shriners and then came back, or it was just part of the conversation. And I said, Tim, I was like, man, you got to check out this book, man. And it's been super helpful for me. And it's something that I think, I did recommend that book a bunch. I mean, I love reading. I'm always reading something. And so it's a real big part of my life. And, I hopeful, that, some of the recommendations I give to people over the years has helped them too.
Yeah.
Well, I see all those books behind you. Are there some of your readings that you've
read? Yeah. Everybody was always like, oh, you grab a bunch of books and stuff. Like everything I've read. Yeah. So everything up there I've read. And in fact, my wife made me get rid of like half my books. And so we donated like about half my books when we moved into this house here. But yeah, it's just a passion of mine. I've always felt like, you can really learn a lot. It's, what is the saying? Like you have to put 10,000 hours into something to become an expert. And ultimately, if you can read a book, you're really kind of getting the cliff notes of a lot of people's lives and a lot of the experiences they have. And so even if it's a fiction book, I mean, I think there's stuff there to be able to help you in life and just work through it, especially if it's from a good source.
I love it.
I agree.
Go ahead.
I was just going to thank Jeff for coming on and spending your time with us, recording and sharing your story with us, because it's very inspirational and I love it. And I'm sure a lot of people can get so much out of it.
Oh, I know, especially the foundation. And by the way, we'll have notes for you guys to find a link to the foundation. So if you guys want to join or donate, Jeff will have to get those details from you to share with the listeners. Absolutely. And I really appreciate you guys having me. Really enjoyed it. Just kind of share my story here, but it's something that hopefully some folks out there find some value in it. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, this was fun. Thank you. And until next time,
live bold and boss up.